Maya and Erin react to 14th Amendment!
Originally, this amendment was supposed to make the Civil Rights Bill of 1866 legal and put an end to the black codes enforced in the South. The first sentence was meant to affirm that former slaves are citizens of the United States and the states that they live in. The rest of the amendment was meant to protect the enumerated rights stated and to guarantee these rights to all Americans regardless of what state they lived in. Through the use of judicial interpretation in some cases, the court had explained the meaning of the 14th Amendment to guarantee more freedoms. However, the court has also limited the scope of the rights listed under the 14th Amendment to shrink the situations in which many of the provisions are guaranteed. Overall, in these court cases, the Supreme Court has decided to expand the scope of the rights affirmed under the 14th Amendment, thereby covering more circumstances and situations.
U.S. v. Wong Kim Ark, 1898.
Because of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, Chinese immigrants were denied citizenship, and no Chinese individual could become a citizen through naturalization. Wong Kim Ark, a Chinese individual born in San Francisco, traveled to China to visit his parents after the act was passed. Upon returning to the U.S., Ark was not allowed into the country because he was not a U.S. citizen, and Ark protested that since he was born in the U.S., he was a citizen. The question was, can the government refuse citizenship to individuals born in the United States, or was Wong a citizen under the 14th Amendment? The answer was that the government could not refuse citizenship to any individual born in the U.S., and that Wong was a citizen under the 14th Amendment. In a 6-2 decision, the Supreme Court found that any individual born in the United States could not be denied citizenship. The case set a precedent for any individual born in the United States, granting them citizenship regardless of their parents' status. It also increased the rights guaranteed under the 14th Amendment. This issue has been more controversial than ever with the increasing amount of immigrants coming to the United States. Many of them are legal aliens who, because of U.S. v. Wong Kim Ark, have children who were born in the States and are therefore citizens.
Graham v. Richardson, 1971.
Arizona requires residents of the state to be a U.S. citizen or resident of the U.S. for at least 15 years to be eligible for welfare benefits. Carmen Richardson was denied welfare benefits on the basis that she is an alien and has resided in the United States for less than 15 years. She declared that the requirement for residency in Arizona welfare statutes was unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment. The question was, does a state, like Arizona, violate the Equal Protection Clause or 14th Amendment when it denies welfare benefits to people who are not yet United States citizens or to aliens who have not lived in the U.S. for at least 15 years? The ruling, in a unanimous decision, declared that yes, this law was indeed in violation of the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment. This case is significant because it gives more rights to aliens or immigrants of the United States. If an immigrant recently moves to the United States, they are denied basic rights such as welfare benefits, and they remain protected under the 14th Amendment. The decision was first in a series of rulings that struck down discriminatory state laws denying public benefits to non-citizens of America. Policy impact. The court later decided that Second 1402B of the Social Security Act of 1935 did not authorize the state of Arizona to withhold welfare benefits from resident aliens who have not lived in the USA for 15 years. This case increased the universalization of civil rights as it gave more rights to individuals living in the U.S. that were not citizens.
Park versus Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, 1971.
The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania was sued by the Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Citizens, PARC, over their law that gave public schools the authority to deny free education to young children who had reached the age of 8 but who had not reached the mental age of 5. The question of the case was, is the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania allowed to deny free education to children who have reached a certain age but don't have the mental capability of that age? The court decided that children who have disabilities are to be given the same exact education as general students, no difference whatsoever, and ruled that the law was unconstitutional. This case was significant because it was the first right to education suit in the whole country to rescind the Pennsylvania law and secure a good quality education for all children, regardless of disabilities. From then on, Pennsylvania was responsible for providing a free education to all children, including children who had trouble blending into the school environment or kids with disabilities. As can be seen, this case extended the scope of the 14th Amendment to include children with disabilities.
Lau v. Nichols, 1974.
In 1971, after a federal court decree, the San Francisco, California school system was integrated. This resulted in about 2,800 students being integrated into the system that were not proficient in English, and this was a problem as the classes were exclusively taught in English. Supplemental English language courses were supplied, but only about 1,000 students received this opportunity. Of these students that did not receive the supplemental courses, Lau and others brought a class action suit against the officials of the San Francisco Unified School District, stating that this failure to provide supplemental courses was in violation of the 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as it provided an unequal educational opportunity. So the question was, when a school district teaches classes exclusively in English and does not provide students who don't speak English with supplemental language classes, is it in violation of the 14th Amendment or the Civil Rights Act of 1964? The answer was yes. In a unanimous decision, the court stated that the school district's failure to provide non-English speaking students with supplemental English language classes was a violation of both the 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as it took away their opportunity to engage fully in the public education program. This case was instrumental in the history of bilingual education and set the stage for many later laws to be passed to further equal education. Since then, many bilingual programs and supplemental English classes have been added in many public schools. Later in 1975, the Lau remedies were created by the Officer for Civil Rights, outlining guidelines to providing a rich education for students not proficient in English.
This case increased the universalization of civil rights as it allowed equal educational opportunities regardless of language barriers.
Bowers v. Hartwick, 1986.
In 1982, Michael Hardwick was seen by a Georgia police officer engaging in mutual consensual homosexual sodomy with a companion in his room. Both Hardwick and the other man were arrested for sodomy, which was a felony under a Georgia statute. The question was, does the Constitution uphold the fundamental right of homosexuals to participate in consensual sodomy, therefore discrediting the laws of states that make such behavior illegal? And the answer in the Supreme Court was no. In a 5-4 ruling, the court upheld the constitutionality of Georgia's sodomy laws, arguing that states had the ability to outlaw these behaviors. The justice writing the majority opinion stated that the court had only acted to protect rights when they were contained within the idea of ordered liberty or when they were entrenched in the United States history and tradition. The opinion diverged from what the court had upheld in earlier cases and narrowed the scope of what the past court cases about privacy applied to. After the case was decided, many state legislatures decided to repeal their sodomy laws, including Georgia. Later in 2003, in the Supreme Court case of Lawrence v. Texas, the court overruled Bowers v. Hardwick and decided that the remaining sodomy laws in the states were unconstitutional as they applied to private consensual conduct among adults. Through the case of Bowers v. Hardwick, the scope of the 14th Amendment was limited as it allowed the states to enforce their own laws over the privacy of citizens.
Bragdon v. Abbott, 1998.
During a visit to her dentist, Raymond Bragdon, Sidney Abbott disclosed to him that she had HIV, although she showed no symptoms. Bragdon then refused to treat or help her in his office, telling her that he could do any necessary tooth work on her at a hospital, at the expense of Abbott paying for being admitted and using the facility. Abbott sued her dentist on the grounds of discrimination, being backed by the American with Disabilities Act of 1990. The question was, can a practicing physician decline or alter care of a patient who is HIV positive without violating the equal treatment agreement of the ADA? According to the Supreme Court in a 5-4 decision, it was ruled that a physician or a caregiver can decline or alter care towards a patient. The HIV is indeed considered a disability because it has effect on major life activities like reproduction, so discrimination is therefore not allowed. This was a critical victory because the ADA and other state disability discrimination statutes from then on fight HIV-related discrimination in housing, healthcare, and jobs. This case had impacted public policy because it was the first case ever addressing HIV, and then on prohibiting discrimination against people living with HIV under the American Disabilities Act. Therefore, this increased the scope of the Equal Protection Clause.
Barnhart vs. Thomas, 2003.
Pauline Thomas, a housekeeper in the late 1980s, had a heart attack. After her recovery, she was unable to go back to work and operate how she did before. She then took a job as an elevator operator, but as the 1990s brought electronic elevators, she was out of a job and could no longer do any form of work. Thomas applied for Social Security disability benefits, but the Social Security Administration denied her claim because they claimed that she was still able to perform her duties from her former position. Just because she couldn't find a position which she could do work didn't mean she could be approved for benefits under disability law, said the SSA. The constitutional question was whether people are eligible for Social Security disability benefits if they're still able to perform their jobs, but the job is no longer popular within the economy. In a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court ruled no, a person isn't eligible for Social Security benefits if they are still able to perform some sort of job, regardless of its popularity. This decision was significant because it restricted a lot of people from benefits of Social Security, even though they couldn't quite find a job that they were able to do. They saved some money, but it also restricted a lot of people from a livable lifestyle. Since this decision, the eligibility for Social Security disability has become increasingly selective. There have been much more rules and regulations than there were before, and the benefits as well as the eligibility for Social Security change almost every year. This case decreased the scope of the 14th Amendment as it limited what was considered a disability, and therefore the eligibility requirements for Social Security.
As can be seen through most of these court cases, the court has expanded the scope of the 14th Amendment, making it more inclusive to diverse groups of people, including immigrants, individuals with disabilities, as well as those falling under LGBTQ+.
Bye! Thanks for watching!